So welcome to the Tri-City Herald Edit Board for Legislative District 16 Senate race. We have Perry Dozier and Danielle. I'm going to butcher your last name. Is it Garbe?
Garbi.
Garbi Reeser. Okay, sorry about that. And the Edit Board we have today is myself. I'm Cecilia Rexis. I'm an editorial writer. And we have Lori Williams. She's the executive editor of the Tri-City Herald. We have Ken Robertson. He's the retired executive editor of the Tri-City Herald. And then Matt Taylor is the retired editorial writer from the Tri-City Herald. So all journalists today. So I'm going to time you for your opening remarks, 2 minutes each, and then we'll just start in with questions. We usually let the incumbent go first, but there is no incumbent. So I'll go alphabetical, Danielle, you with first name. So okay, Danielle, if you wanna start, I will just hit my button.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. I am Danielle Garbi Reeser, a proud American, community builder, and farmer's wife, and I'm so honored to be one of the state Senate candidates this year. I am originally from Moses Lake. My dad had a small business with my grandpa. He was originally from Yakima. My mom worked for the state and was a union member with the Washington Federation of State Employees and really stressed hard work. And my grandfather was a retired Army veteran. He spent a whole career in the military. So we really valued service and commitment. And I was able to first come down to this corner down in Walla Walla because I received a scholarship to attend Whitman. And of course, had spent time in the Tri-Cities growing up with sports matches and occasional trips to Chuck E. Cheese. So really love Central and Eastern Washington and fell in love with Walla Walla, which was a really big city for a kid from Moses Lake, and had a wonderful experience here and set off on my first career, which was serving our country as a diplomat on September 10th, 2001. And I knew I was getting in a challenging career, and it ended up being very clear the next day as we had to evacuate on 9/11. And I ended up spending nearly 14 years around the world serving Republican and Democratic administrations and danger and hardship posts, and had assumed that that would be my full career, except that my little sister died while I was serving in Beirut. And coming back for her funeral and seeing all the people who had raised us just made it so clear what I was missing in that sense of community. And I wanted to be back by my family if I could find a way to serve and get closer. So I did a job search, and that led me back to Sherwood Trust. And the foundation in Walla Walla was set up by the family that had funded my Whitman scholarship, and was a wonderful way to come back and be involved in economic development. And besides meeting my husband shortly thereafter, moving back, a fifth generation wheat farmer himself, the other thing that really stood out about moving back was the ways our rural communities have been, and really huge parts of Eastern Washington have just been left behind or ignored by developments on the west side of the state. And I worked hard to attract outside investment into our region through Sherwood Trust and a big rural philanthropy project that won regional and national recognition. And that was one way to help, but I felt I could do more because part of the problem is structural. We do not have any Democrats from rural Eastern Washington in our majority party. And we need someone there at the beginning of the process to—
I'm gonna stop you there. That is a good place to stop. Yeah, but you're over your time. That's I think you got the message across. No, that's great. Okay, Perry, your turn.
Yes, obviously, thank you for giving us this opportunity today also. I grew up here in the 16th district. I've lived here my entire life. Went to high school just here in Prescott, a little bitty small town, and went on and got a degree in economics from Whitman College. I met my wife when we were in high school. We've been married for 39 years. She's originally a farm family from Waitsburg. I grew up on a farm. We've raised our kids here, and I still continue to farm. And about 20 years ago, I was asked by the outgoing president of the Washington Association of Wheat Growers if I would consider running for an officership with the Washington Association of Wheat Growers. And I hadn't really been active at all in politics, but I said, yes, I would do it. And I served as state president in 2001. It was a 4-year commitment. And then 2 years after that, I served as a Washington State barley commissioner. Now, one of the things I got to do that was so good that got me into politics, I got to work with not only our state legislators, but also our congressional team. And I worked on a project with House Speaker Frank Chop at the time in 1999 to bring some tax relief to farmers as agriculture was really depressed. And then I worked with Laura Loveland to get some funding for the association as we were working to support Washington Department of Ecology on a lawsuit. And I think probably the highlight was when I was back in Washington, D.C. as state president, when Senator Patty Murray asked me to testify before a Senate subcommittee on transportation. And I was able to do that. And it had to do with monopolistic railroad practices. And then I got to talk about our 3 modes of transportation that we have here. 2008, I was elected to Walla Walla County Commissioners. I served 2 terms and again, got to work a lot with the commissioners in your area. During my time as farming, I got to know quite a bit of Franklin County. My father-in-law had some ground over there in North Pasco. I worked with the city of Pasco and Franklin County to develop it. And because of all the interaction that I had with our legislators over the years, and especially as a county commissioner, and seeing what comes from Olympia down to us here and the effects on it, I decided about 18 months ago to pursue this position as state senator. And so we began this journey. It's been quite a few months, and here we are 20 some odd days away.
Great, thank you. Perfect. That's great. So I'm going to ask Danielle. Perry, you mentioned a little bit about your involvement in the Tri-Cities, but I'm going to ask Danielle, what do you know about the Tri-Cities? You're both Walla Walla candidates, but that 16th legislative district is a funny district geographically. It goes from Waitsburg, Walla Walla, Pasco up to Prosser. So Danielle, what can you tell us about your involvement in the Tri-Cities and rural Benton County?
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for the
Pasco.
question. So right after I graduated from Whitman, I worked for 2 years as a recruiter in the admission office, and I had all of Eastern Washington as my territory. And so I got to know a lot of families and schools and the education system across the region during that time. And I'm still in touch with many of the families. Nashante Pleasant Miles was a graduate of Pasco High School who sadly passed away after she matriculated at Whitman, but she was a huge shining star. Mark Lanning and Evan Handy and Hannah Raffay are all families that are still connected in the region, and through sports, of course, knew lots of the schools. And then really since the campaign trail, or I should say my last assignment in government was at the Department of Energy, and I had more of the international portfolio, but I was working with Liz Sherwood Randall, who was the Deputy Secretary of Energy, and she had Hanford cleanup and all of our national laboratories as part of her portfolio. So I got to learn a bit about the amazing work being done on the cleanup and just what tremendous assets our national laboratories are, which many people don't realize. So I understand that piece of the work. And then just being connected, being back here through community organizations. I've been talking to nonprofits like the Boys and Girls Clubs throughout the Tri-Cities. I'm familiar with the community and schools programs. I'm a huge fan of TriDeck and Carl Dye's Coffee with Carls. I listen in on Friday mornings whenever I can, and it's been a really helpful way to hear from the heads of the hospitals or all the higher ed institutions. Right before the crackdown, I spent a fair amount of time in Pasco with at the Collegium Cafe, meeting with community members and connecting with the Tri-Cities Hispanic Chamber. So I've done as much as I can to get a sense of how the issues are different, and they certainly are in terms of growth is dramatically different in the Tri-Cities parts of our district relative to Walla Walla and Columbia County. And then there's some real similarities in Prosser in terms of reliance on the tourism and the ag sector side and talking with families across. And then I spend my days calling voters all across our district. So it's been amazing talking to small business owners in the Tri-Cities, talking about the challenges that they're facing and reopening. I talked to a family in Benton City who had lost their well and was really challenged on water. So trying as much as I can, even in COVID, to be as connected and learn as much and make sure I'm listening to the needs of the community. And that's the kind of legislator I want to be, someone who's connected and involved with every part of our district and a real voice for the region. And the last piece I would just say would be connecting with union partners throughout the district, Teamsters 839, plumbers and steam fitters 536, the laborers 348, a number of these groups, and a lot of the workforce, of course, works at Hanford and other places throughout the district, but I've been endorsed by a lot of the organizations in the Tri-Cities.
Great. So Perry, did you want to elaborate on your connection to the Tri-Cities? I mean, you mentioned a little bit in your opening, but I'm wondering.
Oh,
if
yeah,
there's
yeah,
more.
not a problem. That'd be great. Yeah, but kind of like Danielle, for us, it was a highlight to go over to Pasco and go to Griggs when I was a kid growing up, and come in on Lewis Street. And then I remember when the Columbia Center Mall was built, and I used to fly my airplane over and land there in Kennewick, and we could walk over to it, mall, but obviously that's really grown. So it's been interesting because my father-in-law bought some ground in North Pasco in 1946 when he got out of the war. And it was a bunch of sand dunes at the time. And then in the 80s, they started leveling the ground and they drilled some wells and it became irrigated farm ground. And what happened for me in 1993, my father-in-law was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so I was in my mid 30s at the time. And so I took over all of his business. And at that time, I managed that farm ground in Pasco. It was farmed by a Pasco farmer. And so we just basically let him farm it. And then when they put in I-82 and the growth began there, I was called by the city of Pasco, and they said, well, you've got this 10-acre strip of ground right here that's zoned commercial, and we're going to condemn it if you don't develop it. And that 10-acre strip of ground is right on Burden, straight across from the tract development. So earlier, my father-in-law told me before they started developing, he said, we were on Burden. He goes, Perry, someday this road's going to go over to the airport. And I said, I know he's got Alzheimer's and he's crazy too. And so look at what's happened there. We had about 500 acres there. So I worked with the city of Pasco and Franklin County. We had to get the piece just north of Sandifer. The west border or the east border was Road 60. We had to get it annexed into the city. This was all prior to me being a county commissioner. So we got that all worked in and then ended up selling it. But a little bit more when you elaborated about the 16th district and it being so diverse, it is absolutely crazy. So I dryland farm in Columbia County and Walla Walla County. When you go from Dayton all the way through to Walla Walla, and of course, when I grew up, it was in the 1960s at Prescott, they were putting in the Snake River dams. And that really transformed the western part of Walla Walla County. Brochi, I believe, is the largest apple orchard. I think it's called Fresh Fruits now, but same thing. It was sand dunes. Then the way the district runs, it dives south of Kennewick. I believe it's Badger Canyon area. And all of the farm ground there, that's the most productive farm ground. When I was with the wheat growers 20 years ago, the Horse Heaven Hills would blow crazy. So I know the entire district all the way to Prosser. Prosser's biggest problem, that area, the Rosa-Wada district. They're a junior water right holder out of the Yakima River, and they struggle to get water. You probably want me to be quiet now.
Well,
but
I was
yes.
just thinking that is great.
Okay.
It's like, I don't know. We don't know. We don't know. No, that's fine. We don't normally time our candidates. We let them talk, but if they do go a little long, I have to kind of,
I understand.
say something. No, we get. I think we get the impression, yes, that you're trying to send. So,
okay.
So,
very good.
let's talk about, issues, state issues. So obviously we, are in the middle of this pandemic, and there's different people who have different ideas about how the governor's handled it. Some people think he's done great. Some people think he's done awful. So I guess I'll ask Danielle, what grade would you give the governor on how he's handled the COVID-19 pandemic?
Really, right at the beginning, I appreciated the insistence on using data and science to decide. I think we got a much better grade as we figured out that whereas different parts of the state had different needs, that a one size fits all wasn't going to be helpful both for the response as well as meeting the needs in our communities. And I was frustrated, honestly, at the beginning that every press conference just had folks from King County and the governor talking when we weren't engaging all of our state and all of our community leaders. And I think that made it hard to build the groundswell of support that we needed. But since, first few rocky months, I think we've gotten a process underway where we're understanding the science that needs to be. We've helped communities respond. I'm glad that more things have opened up. I think the Tri-Cities really got stuck there in a challenging spot at the one not quite yet modified. And I just know that's been so hard on families and businesses. So fair to improving is what I'd say, and what I hope that we can continue doing. And by having a strong advocate in Olympia who understands the challenges and differences on the ground in our communities that are really unique compared to Western Washington, we need a voice who can be there, whether it's in the legislative room or talking directly to the governor and explaining what is different here and why we need different supports in our region to make our economy and our communities and our farms thrive.
Okay, what about you, Perry?
Yeah, in the beginning, I agree with what the governor did, shutting down businesses right off. We didn't know what COVID posed in front of us and what it was going to do. And we needed to take that pause, that breath, and say, okay, what's going on here? I mean, this is something totally new. And as we developed some protocol for it and got a better understanding, I think, of exactly what we were dealing with and the contagious part of it, then we started maybe being able to put a plan together. The hardest thing, though, for me at the very beginning, because I talked to a lot of small businesses, was the uncertainty right off and getting shut down that quick. These small businesses totally lost their cash flow, no revenue. Right off, the employees were taken care of because they could get unemployment insurance. They had federal funding for them, but those small businesses were hurting. Then as we started opening up the economy, started learning some things, Walla Walla was very, very fortunate in this. We got into stage 2 early summer, I think it was. And then the town of Walla Walla, well, I think Columbia County stage 3, but I was reading one of your things today about Columbia County is only 14 cases, but the reason why is they don't have a population. But so Walla Walla got to stage 2. And I visited with Saul Martinez last week and a councilman, and then some other business owners in the old downtown part of Pasco. And they're struggling because they're modified 1. So in stage 2, you can have 50%. In stage 1, you get 25%. Get moved to stage 2. They're doing everything that they have to. They should meet what stage 2 is, then they should be able to move there. It really is hurting them and their economy. And I really think it's important that if we continue to do the correct procedures with the PPEs and everything, that we could get Benton Franklin into 2.
Does anyone from the board want to jump in? Trying to, it's hard with a Zoom meeting.
Yeah, I'd be interested in what your priorities would be if elected. What would be some of your top priorities? Maybe you could start, Perry.
Okay, I'd really like to see us get our economy back up and going. What we need to be able to do, prior to COVID, we had a very, very robust economy. And it was so robust that going into the 2020 legislative session, we were looking at a $2.4 billion more revenue than what was actually projected. So if we could get back to having our economy open in some stage, it's going to make up for trying to get out of this bad situation by increasing taxes. That's one of my biggest concerns, is that we don't try to put the burden on those businesses that are able to work, the essential businesses, to get out of this, and try to bring whatever it's going to take, the protective measures we have to get our people back working. When they work, they're going to spend the money. I call those the rollover dollars. They're going to contribute back to the unemployment insurance fund, the B&O taxes are going to pick back up, or sales taxes are going to pick back up. And that's really what I would like to see as a way to get to that. And if I could add just one quick one too. Okay, I would like to see the that emergency governor's powers be limited to 2 weeks before he calls before he calls back the legislators back into session. And it doesn't matter whether we have a Democratic governor or a Republican governor. We all elect our representatives and senators, and they have the heartbeat of our districts. And I think they need to have a voice in what's been going on and moving forward. I really believe that that should happen.
Okay, Danielle.
Well, I really started this campaign by asking voters what were the issues that they thought we needed to tackle in Olympia. And it heard some things initially. Certainly COVID has really underscored 3 that I'll stress in childcare and early learning, in a resilient economy that includes investments to create jobs and partnerships with our community colleges, our unions, and making sure we continue to invest in infrastructure. And then really our healthcare system, and especially making sure we're making investments in mental and behavioral healthcare, including in English and Spanish. And so, you know, just noting on the childcare side, I talked to business owners in the Tri-Cities who had an essential service but couldn't reopen because their workers didn't have childcare options and couldn't come back to work. And I know you just reported a week ago, 44 businesses in the Tri-Cities, childcare businesses closed. And this is we knew this was a critical issue throughout our region, but this gives extra urgency to making sure that we continue to have affordable, accessible childcare. And we know there's a huge return on investment in those early years. What we know now with brain science and the importance of the first 1,000 days of a child's life, and making sure they're ready for kindergarten so that they get the full benefit of the educational system and healthcare outcomes. And then on the economy, we're just so fortunate to have wonderful higher education options throughout our district and wonderful just post-secondary options. But our community colleges have really been hurt in recent years by changes in formulas that move to only head count and not looking as much at outcomes, because we've had really phenomenal outcomes out of both CBC and Walla Walla Community College. So I'd like to make sure we continue to support them, that we're helping people retrain and train up for the jobs of the future. And it's clear that as we look at the infrastructure needed for our economy, that whether it's roads, rails, preserving our dams, we also have to be talking about broadband, because all the ways we get goods to market and we make sure that kids have access to education involves the internet. And then just finally, some of the most heartbreaking stories I've heard over the last many months have been challenges in mental health care providers. And I know folks in Benton County, and there's some efforts to make sure that there are more facilities and support, but it's true throughout our district. I'm hoping that we can find ways to make sure that there aren't over regulatory burdens around getting people licensed, but we also might need to look at new options of making sure more telepsychiatry or counseling is available through Zoom or other safe mechanisms, because it was tough before, and then you have people isolated and under stress for months. And we know that right now in particular, and as we head into winter, we really need to be looking out for our neighbors and each other. And the state can be a partner in bringing together collaborations with business, with nonprofits and others to make sure that we're keeping everybody safe and healthy.
Could I get them both to talk about dams, the Four Snake River dams?
Go ahead, Perry. You did
Okay.
when you were speaking in Washington D.C. Was it
Yes.
about the dams, or was it just about the transportation? I mean,
Well, it was
go ahead.
transportation, but it was relating to the panel on having the 3 modes of transportation that we have. So it was more on captive shippers and in the northern tier states, because the only option they have is rail. And it's very expensive. It was more of a monopolistic practice by the rails. So when I talk about the dam, so when I was with the wheat growers, that's one of the things that we had also wanted to preserve, was that mode of transportation. Each one of those barges contains 100 truckloads of wheat. And so if you look at our lower Snake River dams, let's just go with our district. They're at Lower Monumental and then Ice Harbor. And we have 2 ports there that would put about 115,000 trucks a year on our roads just to get the wheat to the mouth of the Snake River, where the confluence is with the Columbia. So it's going to put pressure on 12 and on 124. And so it's a vital avenue for us to move our products. Also with the dams, as I spoke earlier, they created a whole wealth for our region here with irrigation. We have lower cost electricity. We wouldn't see this part of our district, Western Washington, or even Southern Benton County. Of course, that comes off of the Columbia River, but we wouldn't see it this vibrant for an economy and what it means to us. That is huge for this district. So I'm a very strong advocate of preserving the dams. I just read that there's 4 governors also that are looking at that. I just saw this afternoon on one of your Tri-City updates. And so, I think we're all seeing that possibility that we can work with saving salmon, having the dams, and to preserve our economy here in the district.
Okay, your turn, Danielle.
So I certainly agree with everything that's been said. And I feel like this is really one of the key issues that will be helpful to have a Democrat in Olympia from our district, because I can be in the room to speak up for the ways that we really rely on the dams in our region. And one of the additional ones is just clean hydropower. If our state wants to get to its clean energy goals, we need hydropower as part of that mix. And of course, we also rely on the Columbia Generator Project in Benton, that our region brings some real advantages to the state and meeting those overall climate goals. And so it's being able to go over to Olympia and explain why those dams are so important. Of course, the question on removal is largely a federal issue, and the latest reports, talked about looking at the water spill as one of the ways that we can help mitigate on fish and make sure that we're also protecting them. I also was excited to see that PNNL has been doing some of the research and companies and looking at, again, what's the technology and the science that can also help us on the fish side. And we just can't also forget the jobs, certainly the transportation, as Perry pointed out, when we're only at phase 7 and we're not done on 12, when they're talking about moving that many trucks through, it doesn't make sense. And I would like to bring more common sense and fiscal responsibility to Olympia so that we can explain, how we see things out in our region and try and build more of those bridges and understanding. And I look forward to working on this issue.
You both sound similar, very, that you agree on a lot of those talking points. So I guess the question has to be, what separates you, Perry? What separates you from Danielle, do you think, besides the R and the D? What's the difference?
Well, I really don't know, because I don't know Danielle that well in depth, but we've got to be on a lot of different forums and everything. But I'm really, I would say a fiscal conservative. I don't believe in big government or high taxation and regulation. I'm really open for economic expansion. One of the big things that I still feel strongly about is agriculture and the importance of it in this region, and especially our district. And I think that comes from all the years that I've been involved with it and serving with the wheat growers. But I think Danielle brought up a good point, and the mental health side of things. I'll agree with her on that. But I know I hate to say it, I was on Greater Columbia Behavioral Health Board for 8 years, and we have some very pressing times. But I think maybe the difference may be that I don't want to see us have a capital gains tax or a state income tax. I don't believe in taxing to get your revenue when we can have a vibrant economy to do it. I'd rather see people prosper and have more disposable income for their lives than being reliant upon the government.
Okay. Danielle, you have response to that?
Well, and certainly, I think it speaks to the fact that we both understand our district well, and, we see the problem similarly. Part of what I've been arguing is we need to have someone who can argue about these issues with the Democrats who don't understand Eastern Washington. And I want to be in that room standing up for our communities. I will say on the issue of taxation, I've been very clear since the beginning of the campaign that I do not support an income tax. And I know, especially in talking to voters across our district, they're strapped. And, I talked to one voter in Dayton who said he was thinking about moving out of Washington state because he just couldn't keep up with all the different ways that his income seemed to be getting taxes or fees or other challenges. And so I'm really aware of that. I think the big difference that I would point out is, certainly my motivation and my skill set is different in that I have committed my whole life to serving our country and our communities. And I've done that both in Republican and Democratic administrations. So I bring this global, national, statewide, and depth of local experience to the table. And I think that matters at a time when we're facing a global pandemic, global issues from climate change. We are just seeing the breadth of challenges now. And in 2018, you probably didn't ask any of your candidates about their response to a global pandemic. So we have to be thinking about what are the challenges we face now and what are the ones we could face in the future, and who has the breadth of leadership and crisis management experience, and really that depth of commitment and service that I believe I bring to this race uniquely.
Are you trying to talk, Ken?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay, speak up.
I'd like to ask you about a question about our processing plants, because I've heard you both talk a lot about farming, but this area between Pasco and Walla Walla Dayton has always been a major player in food processing in Washington, and certainly the Prosser areas too. And they're facing unique challenges with the pandemic. And I'm wondering what either of you or what each of you would bring to Olympia that would allow you to make sure that people over there understand how critical they are to our region economically and to the state economically.
Yeah.
So Danielle, you can go first on this.
It's so key, and Perry and I were just talking about and agreeing on this issue.
Oh, yeah.
Because
like
right, part of the challenge of the timing of when the crisis started was planting season, right? So from the grower side, you saw a tremendous amount of uncertainty about what it was going to mean for labor markets or for sales on the other end. And then quickly, it didn't take long before we saw the challenges at Tyson and, not having a unionized workforce. And so Teamsters 839 had been talking to folks there. And so it was one of the things I was trying to get more information about early is how do we keep our workers safe? Because if they couldn't go to work safely, our food supply was at threat of being shut down for long periods. And, we have seen an upsurgence, certainly on the Walla Walla side with our local farmers markets. We have a new company called Butcher, where, people want to know more about their food source. But we know these are huge parts of our statewide and really our regional agriculture system. So we saw in contrast, Lamb Weston did an excellent job early on being transparent, getting supplies to people. We're in a situation now, question that you all reported on, right, with Twin City Foods. And I've been talking to UFCW 1439 about what they're hearing from workers. And I know it's hard for employers to even get supplies, right? So we have to figure out the balance between making sure that companies are taking it as seriously as they need to, that they have access to the supplies, the equipment, and the guidance to keep their workers safe, and that workers are well informed through the process, and that those who want to unionize continue to have the right to do that. So the only thing we didn't touch on the other day when we were talking about it is really that last piece of the food supply is also our grocery system, right? And making sure that those supply chains all the way through are strong, and our essential workers in our grocery stores also, which is UFCW 1439, you know, they've been working to make sure people, again, have the equipment, and even just that people are able to access. Our stores have done a tremendous job of pivoting, right, to provide deliveries and other ways so that people would feel safe going to the grocery store. It added, we look after my father-in-law who's 88, and he used to love going to the grocery store, and, you know, we had to say, like, we'll take care of getting the groceries. So whether it all the way from the field to the fork, it's critical that we keep those supplies safe, the people involved in every piece of the system safe. And I think the way to help the West Side understand it is at some point bringing them over. That's what worked for me in philanthropy, was really getting people, you know, eyes on what was happening here on the ground, the tremendous resources, the amazing creativity and innovation that happens across this region, so they understand it. And if we can't do it in person, at least figuring out some kind of Zoom, because really talking to the people who are doing this tremendous work, I think is inspiring and helps us understand where the state, you know, is either making more burdens on some pieces or could be more helpful in others.
Okay, Perry, food processing.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll go back 40, 50 years ago. Dayton had the Seneca plant there. Waitsburg had Green Giant, largest employers. How many people have left since we've lost those? Walla Walla had Birdseye. That was huge. My mom used to work there when I was a child. We've lost all of those. So these smaller towns now, they're gone. But we've got ConAgra, we've got the southern part of Benton County with all of those processing plants there. But the most important thing is the employees. And that's something that, you know, this outbreak of COVID has been so devastating on those plants, and also for them to be able to get into the fields. I know here on my farm where I'm raising seed corn for Pioneer, I'll get the Hispanic Latino workers in here, probably 60 of them at a time coming in. And I can tell you the employers that they work for have done a great job of having them clean watering stations and places to clean up and try to keep them in there. It was such a critical time to have them there. And again, I'll talk about that the importance of ag for us, that we can't have those workers get coronavirus and drop off, or those plants will close. Southern part of Benton County, those processing plants there, whether they're making wine or they're doing mint. I was really impressed when I drove down there to southern Benton County here when they're harvesting and with all the processing that they're doing. I will obviously advocate very strongly for what we have to do to keep these businesses continuing going forward, because again, they are such an essential part of our economy in this district and in Eastern Washington.
Trying to think, you all sound so eloquent. It's very.
You're getting
really
at the end of the campaign season.
Yes, you've rehearsed. I was thinking about I think it's referendum 90. They call it the sex ed bill. If you had been in office, how would you have voted on that? Danielle, I'll let you go. How would you have voted for that?
I've really been talking to families about this one and have heard a lot of concern about child safety on both sides of this issue. So overall, I think it's really important that the legislation that came forward had the option that parents could opt out. And talking to some families, they really appreciate that emphasis on healthy relationships, consent, information that all kids need. And so as I've really been talking to families, I've tried to make sure that they know that the curriculum on the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. So encouraging families to get the facts and to be sure to vote in November, because I think that will help us understand going forward what needs to be done and what the views are of our community. And it's an issue where I think it's really important to hear from voters before deciding.
So would you have voted for it in the session? Or I think my computer's been freezing a little bit. Oh, it's frozen.
More on this. I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing us revamp that if that's what we can do. But if you asked me the question how I would have voted this last year, I would have voted against it.
You would have voted. My computer froze. Oh,
So
it's
you
still,
you don't think the opt-out portion option is good enough? A lot of parents.
Well, you have to opt out, but then if the kids that are opted in, kids talk, they do things, I mean, I still believe that it needs to be tailored differently. There's stuff in there that they're as my child. So if that's what you're asking me, is that would I approve it? Again, no. I mean, even if I could opt out, I still don't like it.
I'm afraid my computer froze through most of that. I was so disappointed.
Oh.
So you would have voted, so Perry, you would have voted no. Danielle, would you have voted no, or would you have voted yes? I didn't catch
I
it.
really would want to hear from the district before deciding
Okay,
on this.
before you decide. Okay, I'm sorry.
The district, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I all of a sudden I was like, oh, this is the best question. And
Yeah, I
then
think so.
my computer froze, so. Anyway,
So she keeps freezing.
yeah.
The oh, there you are.
I know, I'm sorry. My computer's tired.
Something else on that? Cecilia?
What?
Cecilia, did you have something else to add to that before we move on?
No, I
or-
just wanted to be clear what the answers were, because I'm so sorry, my computer froze and you were both talking and I didn't catch it. So I just wanted what the gist was, so.
I was just going to ask about the revenue concerns for the state and what, that picture keeps changing. We were just on a previous call with some candidates who were talking about that. And I'm wondering if what in particular you're thinking, if it comes to that, if they're not able to recover that revenue. So maybe start with you, Perry.
Yeah, that's true. I'm glad that it's coming back. I can tell you right now, we're pretty, I talked to our county treasurer here in Walla Walla, and I was really surprised to hear this figure. He said that we were going to have some almost record sales tax revenue, and we're only in stage 2, and which really surprised me. And when I drastic moves going forward, and some of the things that we looked at, obviously, we froze all elected official salaries, and mine was frozen for the last 5 years that I was a commissioner. And we also looked at, we talked to the 4 unions that we have and asked for their concession to be able to freeze theirs at least for a year until we could see how we could get through the next stage. And we did that. We used furlough days for people, but we tried not to lay anybody off. And because when you lose employment, it costs you a lot more money to do that. So I like to see ways to go back to that same level of, okay, and I know that the governor has done that, froze some salaries moving forward, but I think we need to look at that. If there's a project out there that, say, is partially funded, we'll probably just stop it and not move it forward. If we have projects, I went about our transportation projects that we have. Obviously, we have 12. We have Lewis Street here in this area. There's been millions and millions of dollars put into them. Those need to continue to move forward. We got to look at the capital budget and just see what the feel-good fun projects that we want to be able to do have no funding. We may have to stop them, is what I'm looking at doing there. But until I can actually look at a full budget, I couldn't even hardly start picking and choosing to make sure that we continue to keep that funded very well. I don't want to see us take funding away from higher education at all, because I think it's going to play a very vital role getting through this pandemic with people that have lost their jobs to have to go back to school, especially our community colleges and trade schools.
Danielle?
I'm really interested in the budget pieces relative to a few different parts. One is certainly, was there anything new approved in January under a rosy budget scenario that hasn't already been vetoed that wasn't emergency, and that we start there. It's looking at what federal government support we might yet still be able to come in, get back in if they get back to the negotiating table. And then it's really talking to the experts, right? The agency heads have been asked to make recommendations. I want to make sure we're hearing and listening to them and their guidance, and then really asking our community members of where are the priorities that they see and how do we involve them in the budgeting process. That was, at Sherwood Trust, I oversaw $30 million of investments, and we had about $1 million we were giving in grants each year. And we had to make hard decisions. We'd have $2 to $3 million of requests, and we had to be able to evaluate those requests and decide all of them sounded good. We would have loved to have done them all, but if you don't have the money, you can't do it. And so I understand how to evaluate programs, how to make tough decisions, how to make sure whether it was capital projects we were helping our community build, or jobs we were helping nonprofits add into their systems, that we were making smart, wise decisions. And I think, especially as Perry said, right, any of those programs where we know they'll add economic benefit, and that if we cut them now, there are some issues on mental health or in housing, they're just going to create more expensive problems later. So there are ways to balance the budget now that just give you headaches in the future, and I'd really like to make sure we're avoiding that.
I guess I have another question for you, Perry, about Danielle's made, a key point of her, arguments to vote for her. The fact that she would be in the majority party and have, maybe more influence in that role. What would your counter argument be to being on the other side of that?
Well, if you're talking about her being having an influence with the Democratic caucus, then she would have to be in line of what the caucus wants, or they wouldn't move it forward. For instance, if you look at, when I talk about taxation and you look at what the Democratic Party has proposed, I got this off of their website. It's a progressive tax system at both the federal, state level, including taxing unearned income at the same rate as earned income, state income tax offset by cuts in regressive taxes, state capital gains. It's tax, 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 tax. And a proposal that was put out there this last year by a senator, a Democratic senator, was for a $17 billion tax increase to fund transportation over 10 years. Now, if you get elected as a Democrat, how are you going to go against the system? We've already seen what's happened with right now in the state level with Senator Mullet, who has been an incumbent, who is a moderate Democrat, and Governor Inslee has endorsed another Democrat to run against him. So I guess that's my concern. Is it sounds good that you're going to represent us, but when the governor says he isn't going to endorse an incumbent senator who's a moderate, then how much are they going to listen to you?
What's your response, Danielle?
Well, certainly,
The gloves are coming off.
Right. As we've said, we have a lot of the same arguments on the issues. And the reality is, as a Democrat, I get to make them in the room as the decisions are made. And they may be the same ones that the minority is making on some issues, but they make them later on the floor if the bill even ever leaves the Democratic caucus room. So my argument is the way to shape legislation in a way that works for our region that frankly would be different than we've been doing it for the last decade is let's try sending a Democrat into that room who can stand up for our communities, because we've sent entirely Republican delegations for a long time. And a lot of times they come back and they say, sorry, I couldn't get that done because we were in the minority party. And the Democrats are going to keep having the majority for at least the next couple years. So I would just rather have our communities have a louder voice and have a say in the process. And no, there's going to be times where, you know, I might not get everything that we ask for, and that's true of every legislator. But influence is about being in the room where decisions are made. It's about my track record of building strong relationships all around our state, of having a long track record of working with both parties. And I feel like I can build the trust and relationships like Bill Grant and Valora Loveland and other Democrats have. And I love Eastern Washington, and I want to stand up and fight for our communities in Olympia.
I was wondering if there was any other questions from the board.
I don't have any.
You don't have any? I feel like we've covered quite a bit. I don't.
I'll make a comment. I'll make a comment.
Okay.
Sometimes these are easy. Choosing between two candidates for us, and a lot of experience, and this is going to be tough. This is two good candidates. I think either one of them would serve us well. But I'm just speaking for me, the editorial board, me. Your reputations, I'm not sure.
No, I think you do sound very similar. Are there other issues that you know that you're worlds apart, or was there a question? I did. Sometimes we do let candidates ask each other a question. Is there a question you'd like to ask each other? Danielle, do you have a question for Perry?
Well, I think certainly one that's been on my mind is that because we have agreed, especially on the masking issue, but I know that there are at least 4 instances where Perry showed up in large groups without a mask. So it makes me wonder, you know, how people can really rely that he is, he means what he says, and that he's really keeping our community's public health at the forefront.
You want to respond to that, Perry?
I have gone to places. Yes, that's absolutely right. I wear a mask where I'm required to wear a mask if I'm close to people. And if that's an issue, I wear a mask. I keep them in all of my vehicles right now, any stores that I go into. And yes, I have gone places where Danielle's right, that I've gone to gatherings without it. It's, you know, it's a right I think that we all have, but I'm also protecting myself, and I don't feel that I put anybody in danger.
Okay. Do you have a question for Danielle?
I'll just on the last one too, a little bit, Danielle, when you've talked a lot about having a greater rate of return for our district if you go to Olympia, because you talked about that again here because you're going to sit with the Democratic caucus. Well, I have worked with both sides for 20 years and have done very well working with both sides, as I spoke about with Frank Chop getting tax relief for us here. When you're talking return on investment, though, Danielle, the Democratic Party has invested into your campaign. Don't they want a rate of return also? So are you going to be able to buck the system?
Yeah, it's a great and a really fair question, right? Like, how does money influence the campaign? And Perry's raised questions about that. And I would just say I'm hugely proud that 3/4 of my donations and raising record fundraising levels are from individuals. And they're from my aunt and uncle in Florida, as well as lots of people here in the 16th. And I know Perry has taken money from Tesoro Oil Company in Texas. And so, right, we make choices about the money that we take in our campaigns and how we use that. And there is party money in my campaign, and they see the opportunity here. We have not had a Democrat in this seat for 2 decades, and partly we haven't even run a competitive campaign. So I'm the first person in quite a while who's been able to mount a challenge and do that well. And I think as we're also thinking about money that influences the race, over $140,000 came into this race from independent expenditures that knocked Bill Jenkins out of the race. And Perry, that money was from an organization that backed you, and you didn't have anything to do with it, but you know, to your point, there's money.
No, I
involved.
didn't know anything about that,
That
Danielle.
influence.
So, I mean, I even when that happened, I'm going, what the heck is going on here? So
You never
you're absolutely
condemned
right.
it or, said anything. So I'm happy
Oh,
that
I
the
did
money
tell
that
Bill. I did talk to Bill and let him know because he was concerned. And that is not something I approved, Danielle. In all honesty, I knew nothing about it.
well, I appreciate that because as you said,
Yes.
that's hard. And it was, I know, hard on him. And for someone who'd served our district well to be treated with unfair representation. And, obviously the Republicans really wanted you to be in this seat. And so we've all said this is a big race in our state and it's one with a lot of interest. And I think Perry and I have done a really good job of making it competitive and making it tough. So we're doing our jobs and just really appreciate all of you taking the time.
Can you clarify what company? I guess I didn't know the background on this. What company funded Perry's campaigns to get Bill out? Is that what you were saying?
No.
No. It was an independent expenditure, so it didn't involve Perry at all. But the
I see.
Washington Realtors Association has also contributed to Perry, and then they did the attack on Bill, and they did pro Perry pieces as well.
The
No, not
Realtor
pieces.
Association?
Mhm.
Oh,
They
just
were the
one.
largest funder. They're also the Stand for Children PAC, which he also took money from, also was part of that.
Oh, okay.
After the primary.
After the
Both
primary?
of those that came in were after the primary,
Okay,
those two fundings.
okay. Wow, interesting. So
Yeah,
we
there's
should.
money like that here in a while either. So
Okay, so we should probably do our closing. We're getting down to the end here. So let's see, we had Danielle go first on the closing. Perry, I'll let you, on the opening. Perry, I'll let you go first
Yeah.
on the closing.
Okay, I almost feel like we've talked so much about ourselves that it's almost a closing when you talked about that. But
Yeah.
basically, just to kind of close it, I have again been working on this notion that I was going to run for Senate 18 months ago. And the reason being is because of all my experience in the past with this district and seeing the changes, as I talked about, from the time I was a child to the difference funding that we get from the state as the county commissioner, and which is so vital for us over here when the state makes decisions to pull funding for our health departments. And why did they do that? And the unfunded mandates that we're faced with. I talked to our sheriff about unfunded mandates and where he has to do things and the county has to cover the cost or we don't get it done. I want to be able to take the experience that I've gained as a lifelong resident here, as a past county commissioner, and go over there and try to bring that same level of expertise that I learned here over there to Olympia to make our district, Eastern Washington, still a very strong, vibrant, great place to live. I love Eastern Washington and I want to remain here for the rest of my life.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, Danielle, you can sum up.
So a huge thank you again for the conversation, great questions, and for all of your work keeping our communities informed. I know how much pressure there's been on journalism and just really appreciate your keeping readers and all of us informed about what's happening in our local communities. And there are tremendous stories and things happening in our local communities. And I loved being involved at Sherwood Trust so I could shine a spotlight on the phenomenal work that was happening here and great initiatives that really could help other districts all around the state. And I'm running because Eastern Washington gets overlooked and ignored far too often. And I'm tired of making it easy for Western Washington Democrats to ignore us. So I don't like complaining about problems that I don't try to fix. And I felt that by running, I could really stand up for our district and make sure that we are heard in Olympia in a way that makes a huge difference for our region. And I'm just really have been so honored to have the opportunity to run, to learn about every part of our district, to engage with people about where the needs are. And there are tremendous needs in our region as well. And I would be so honored to get to stand up for our region so that we could start tackling them in ways that make sense, forging partnerships with government, business, and nonprofits like I've done historically to see how can we get our economy back on track, support our families, our farms, our agricultural sector, and really keep building a bright future for this whole region. I'd be so honored to earn your endorsement. So thank you very much for the consideration.
Great. Thank you. This was lovely. It was great. So we'll say farewell to Perry and Danielle, and I'm going to keep the board for a little bit longer. So
Okay.
so much.
thank you. Thank you
Bye-bye.
so
Thank
much.
you.